All right. I believe we've got Dr. Josh Green on the phone with us. Are you there, Doctor?
I am. Aloha, everybody.
Hey, aloha. We were just playing, I don't know if you were able to hear it on your side, but we were just playing a song that's very appropriate for this as an intro for you. It's called Witch Doctor by David Seville.
Great. I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah. Well, we just want to keep things kind of light, even though I know that we're going to touch on a couple of really serious subjects probably. But first of all, first and foremost, how are you?
Well, thank you for asking. I'm doing fine. I feel well, or pretty good anyway. I do have COVID, and I want, before we go any further at all, to reassure people that I tested positive on Friday after being in contact with one of my security guys who was sick, who tested positive. But when I was over there in Kohala this last weekend, I had just gotten a negative test, as we do. So got a negative test last Wednesday, was negative, and then probably got sick when I was with him in the car. But so far, we don't think I spread it to anybody. But even so, I'm feeling fine, and so kind of you to ask. I felt fatigued at first, a little bit on Wednesday. After leaving Big Island, I felt some fatigue and a little bit of coughing, but that's it.
And how's your family doing?
They're doing great.
Everybody's okay.
Everyone is totally asymptomatic. Jamie and the two kids they're here in home isolation with me. I'm in Sam's room, in his bedroom, and he moved out and he's living large in the main room. So
he's getting kicked out already, man.
Yeah, he's doing good over there. He's doing very well. But they're asymptomatic. They've gotten their test. They got their test today, so we'll get the results back soon. And so far, so good. They're totally without effect. And
Awesome.
I should also mention that all of my staff at the state capitol has tested negative, and all of the patients, which we just checked in an extra precautionary way, and the couple of staff that I was with over in Kohala, everyone has tested negative so far because we were wearing masks the whole time. So that's basically the cautionary tale. Everybody tends to avoid getting spread if they wear masks. I was just unfortunately in the car for an hour and 15 minutes and on the plane sitting right next to someone who unfortunately was positive, and that's just kind of what happened. So even then we were wearing masks, but he was coughing pretty bad, and I guess that's how it spread. He's doing okay, too.
Well, I'm glad to hear it. I'm glad to hear you guys are doing okay and on the mend. Yeah, we were concerned when we heard here in Kohala, but glad to hear that everybody is doing well. And hey, it happens. As for as many precautions as we want to take and as we can take, sometimes that kind of stuff happens.
It does. We're learning a lot from every single day, but a couple things that I think are important messages to keep in mind. Number one, if we can test faster, which is something I'm focused on as your lieutenant governor, if we can get people's tests done in big numbers and get the test results within 48 hours, then this never happens. For example, my buddy who works with me, his wife, it turns out, had a upper respiratory infection, and she went and saw somebody, but they didn't test. They just gave her antibiotics. And that's okay. I mean, maybe some might do it differently, but because she wasn't tested, he was with her at home and so on, and then he caught the virus from her at some point, then was out with us, and it led all the way to Hawai'i, to your doctor, and then back to Honolulu. Had he gotten a test, or had she gotten a test, rather, and they had known right away, he would have been in 14 days isolation with her, taking care of her. He would have tested, but he would not have come to work. We would have never been in the car together and so on. So it shows you that what we're recommending is actually the right stuff in real terms. If we get tests and we can get the result without waiting 2 weeks or some terrible length of time, get it within 48 hours, then we can mitigate the spread. And that's what I'm going to make sure happens for us as a state.
That's excellent news. I had a question about immunity. When you have had COVID, I think Mother Nature generally gives us a little bit of immunity to that the next time. Is that true with COVID? And if we see reinfections occur, to what kind of severity would we expect?
Well, brilliant question. So the answer is basically yes. If you catch COVID, you will have immunity. It's not clear with this particular coronavirus if you have total immunity, but the expectation is you do. And people who have had second infections have tended to have, and it's been very rare, far, far less symptoms. Also, they now believe that people may not have actually had second infections. They think, and there's always going to be some very rare outliers, of course, but they think that people who have second infection are still picking up viral particles, the remnants of the viral particles, which is very sensitive. You can detect them from before. So people might continue to test positive or test positive 3 months later when they actually had their infection back in February or March. So really, you'll be immune. Just like you're immune to the strain of common cold that you get or the strain of flu that you get once you've gotten through it.
Yeah,
so,
Mother Nature does a good job of that.
Yeah, Mother Nature does a great job of that. And we now can also assess people's antibodies and see how much antibody response they get. So I'll be a living story about that. You can be sure. So I'll get antibody tests. And, and the next time I'm up there, which, by the way, I'm both happy and sad. I'm happy that I won't carry any risk for anybody, but I'm not back until, I think, October 11th, 12th. And knock wood, by then I will be long done with this virus. I might already be done with it, but of course I'm going to stay in quarantine for the full length of time.
In your son's bedroom, of course.
Yeah, I got all kind of like stuffed animals and dinosaurs and crap around
to keep you company. I know. Sometimes that's the best medicine right there.
That's
Speaking of medicine, I wanted to ask where we are in terms of having a truly effective vaccine in the hands of doctors in Hawaii. I know in Russia they've said that they've come up with a vaccine, but how close are we really to something that we can trust?
I think it's going to be December, January when it gets rolled out, and I'm hopeful that the pledge that all of the pharmaceutical people took will hold, that they'll do the full rigors of testing and safety precautions on anything. And then what I'm going to recommend, because I'll be running that program, will be a 30 to 60-day pause to make sure that they will offer it to people if they want, but before we do a mass vaccination program, that we have seen that there wasn't any widespread side effects. We would never, a lot of people don't believe in vaccinations. That's their prerogative. I don't ever fight with them. It will be optional. On the flip side, a lot of people also want their community to be vaccinated so they can get back to normal life. So we just want to make sure it's safe. This thing is being rushed. I mean, heck, they're calling it Operation Warp Speed, for gosh sake. So if you're going to do that and rush things, there have been some vaccinations that were less ideal than others. Most work very well, but we don't want any major side effects. There's a syndrome called Guillain-Barré syndrome that if you get a bad reaction, you can have that, which causes weakness or partial paralysis. Can't have that happening. It's really rare. But, we'll want to make sure that when they go through these trials, they're trying to get 30,000 people or more into each trial, that there hasn't been anything that's particularly nasty.
Okay. So January, February, we're looking at that. So as we roll out the school year, I understand that in the month of August, and this I was just reading on the CDC website, in the month of August, hospitalizations actually declined, except for children's cases under the age of 17. Is that the case here in Hawaii, or is that something we need to be concerned about?
Always mindful of that, for sure. We've had almost no hospitalizations, I think just like one or two of children that I'm aware of. Now, of course, once kids are back to school, there will be more transmission, as though our schools are preparing, and you can never prepare well enough. My general feeling is we have to make sure that everyone, parents, children, and of course our teachers and administrators feel comfortable going back. If they don't feel comfortable going back, we should arrange for them to continue their education at home or continue to teach from home. That's just a fair thing. But we also have to do things like make sure everyone has enough protective equipment, everyone can get a test if they want while I'm ramping that up, all these different things. I think that you will probably see an uptick in cases of kids, but a decrease in cases in adults. I'll tell you this, today we are at 80 cases total, which is a significant improvement statewide. And yesterday and today were the first 2 days in 2 months where our number of active cases, total active cases statewide dropped. It dropped. Yeah, that's huge because that means we've turned the corner, and our positivity rate, our 7-day average positivity rate is 2.3%. That's also very good. That's one of the better ones in the country again. We surged briefly, and now we're back down. So all of this data is super good, but that means we have to be unbelievably careful no matter what decisions we make, whether it's eventually travel opening up, which we'll have a pretest for and should be very minimally risky. I know people are worried about that, but we're worried about a lot of things, right? The economy, and we're worried about how people are responding. Hold on. Sorry, I sneezed.
Bless you.
Thank you. That'll set off a maelstrom of trolling, I'm sure, throughout the world. But you do have COVID after all.
We do.
So the deal is going to be really that we will get we'll get our numbers down, and we will restore some sanity to our economic activity in schools. And I will watch every day that we're not seeing an uptick in cases, that our hospitals are better. We're now down to 208 people in the hospital, down from a peak of 318 with COVID, so that's almost 30% down. So it looks like we are on the other side of the mountain, but heck, I know Big Island as our home, we've been worried because we saw a bit of a surge. So all these things are the focus that I have, and I'm going to stay on it. I'm working from home, through this strange circumstance.
Yes, I know. And thank you. That's awesome. I know a lot of people in our community have a lot of faith in you and trust in you and feel, that you're very sincere in the efforts that you're taking to protect us and to protect our ohana, our children. So mahalo for that. I had another question about the Pacific Islander population and community. It seems that there's, according to what I read last month, 4% of the population of our Hawaii state population was COVID positive, but 30% of that was Pacific Islander, part of the Pacific Islander population. Is that still the case, or have we made improvements in that area?
It's starting to improve. Even the more specific on that piece of data, which you're basically right on, is the Pacific Islander community setting aside the Native Hawaiians. So sometimes people say Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islanders, and then some just say Pacific Islanders. So if you say Pacific Islander community, that means 4% of the total population is Pacific Islander, 4%, but they did make up 30% of all the cases. And that is terrible. And that's also what we've seen in other communities across the country where there are a lot of Pacific Islander community families. The main reason for that is there's multi-generational households, and some larger numbers per household exist. So in Kalihi, in Waianae, there have been really big surges. At one point, it was over 50% of the people that were tested during 1 week that were Pacific Islanders tested positive, which was way higher than anything else in the state. Yeah. So that is a big problem. My team, actually, which has a lot of Pacific Islander members in it, I have a bunch of people who are Samoan on my team. We've put together a special kind of assault squad on the problem, and they're going out and doing translations. They're providing extra testing. We're acting as volunteers with Department of Health, especially for that community, with a special focus on the Pacific Islander community so that we can knock those numbers down.
That's awesome.
Another way that spread was happening was through funeral services and traditional practices like kava ceremonies, which are very prevalent in the Micronesian community. So by helping to translate and get that safer, the case counts will come down. Also, we're putting together a lot of hotel rooms for individuals, whether people are Pacific Islander or not, of course. So if you're in a big household and someone tests positive, we can either move the kupuna out so that they don't catch it and die, or that we can move the sick individual who's just someone like me. If, for instance, I'm lucky enough to have an extra bedroom in the house, so I take over my 9-year-old's bedroom, and he goes and sleeps, on the couch or with his mom or something for a couple days. But if you have 9 people in a household that's 3 bedrooms,
it's tough.
You can't separate. Yeah. And so we feel very fortunate, but we're setting up hotel rooms so people can go and have that space for free for them, because it's kind, I think, and also it's good public health. It means we won't have spread.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's a great step in the right direction. I know we've got just a couple more minutes with you, so I wanted to, if we have time, I wanted to ask you, many of our Kohala community members work in the visitor in this industry, and we've been out of work for about 6 months now. And a lot of the discussion regarding hotel reopenings has revolved around going back to pre-COVID status quo. Has any thought or discussion been aired regarding revamping the visitor industry to better reflect a more environmentally and eco-friendly visitor industry where we run tourism and the corporations don't,
Yes, there's a lot of that. And I think we just hired a new Hawaii Tourism Authority leader, who's John DeFries, who's from Big Island, actually.
Oh, yes.
And John is very akamai about these things. I think that is the direction he will tend to take things. I think there's, number one, there's several important points probably to make in this area. One is, we can't sustain 10 million people the same way we did before. It's not going to work. 2, we want good tourism. It's important to us, but we want it to be culturally sensitive and environmentally sound. So we'll lean that way. 3, and that's going to take a lot of work, but the work will be ongoing for the next 5 years.
Great.
The next thing I think you have to guess is when we start. And so we actually, with the pre-testing program, can keep the risk down to almost, below our own current risk of spreading. But it won't be guaranteed. I think we can get it down to less than 1 out of 1,000 people who travels will have asymptomatic COVID. Nobody with symptomatic COVID will come here, but asymptomatic, that would mean if we have 10,000 arrivals, we'd have 10 people, and that is a number we can sustain as long as we're smart. Right now, we've, of course, been averaging 122 for the last 7 days, and before that, a day, and before that, we were averaging 250. So if we open up like that, it'll be good. And also, we're going to have a lot more rapid tests available. So all these things are considerations, but I know a lot of people, they're just, they have to work. Right. And, I don't know where our listeners are specifically on this, but more often than not, I hear people say to me, I'm willing to accept that we can never get to a no-risk situation. Keep us safe, but open up our economy again. And that's essentially what's going to happen. The governor's going to make a decision in the next day or two about what date. And if I had to venture a guess, I will guess it's going to be mid-October or sooner. But it's going to be sometime between October 1st and November 1st. I'm almost certain of that.
That's good news. That's good news for a lot of people here on the island. I know you've got to get running. You've got some meetings and a lot of other things to take care of. But is there anything you'd like to add in closing? Or?
Well, I just wanted to say thank you, everyone. You are my community, really. I still live up with you 2 weekends a month, and I'm so honored to be a doctor in general and a doctor more specifically for Big Island. I hope that this scare didn't spook too many people. This is what happens. Remember, about 20% of all COVID cases are actually in doctors or nurses, 20% of all cases, because, we care for people that might also be sick.
Right.
And that's what we believe in, and so that's okay. So this is a very common circumstance, but I wanted to tell you how much I respect and love you guys up there. I intend to keep doing this for as long as people will have me, or maybe, I don't know, if I serve as governor someday, I'm not sure what they're going to let me do. But
yeah, I'm glad you said that.
Maybe. I'll certainly run for governor, but no one, that's like the worst kept secret in the history of mankind. But
that's awesome.
I will serve as long as people will have me and want me to do it. But I love being a doctor, and we're learning a lot, even from my small example. But I think nobody's going to test positive. I hope and expect that's the case in our community. And keep wearing your mask, socially distance appropriately, and then we're really quite safe and we're okay. So I'll be checking on all these things, and you guys are just terrific. So thank you for understanding about all of these things that happen.
Oh, thank you. And thank you so much for being on our show this morning. Anytime you want to come on and give us a little blurb or spiel about whatever it is, just let me know. Give us a buzz. We're always here at KNKR, LP 96.1 FM. Mahalo anui loa, Dr. Josh Green, Lieutenant Governor of the state of Hawaii.
Thank you so much.
Aloha. Ahui ho.
Bye.